Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about our 2011 Mini Cooper. This is a video I want to make for a while. We had a catastrophic meltdown, catastrophic overheating with this thing, and I want to talk about what I went through to put it back together, the tools and all the parts I had to buy, and then you know, the luck I had and the bad luck I had. This thing's been the bane of my existence. We still have some electronic issues that I'll sort out in probably another video. But I'll dive right into telling you what happened. When we moved from Northern Virginia to North Carolina, on the road, on the way here, this thing had a catastrophic overheating. It had been running pretty good since then. It was a little over 115,000 miles, something like that, a little over 100,000 miles. It did burn a little oil out of the tailpipe, but other than that, it ran pretty good. The main issue, and I'll show you here, I do have a list because I'll forget about all the things that either went wrong or I had to replace. So we'll start at the top, and the top is the radiator hose. So I know it's hard to see. I know it's probably difficult to see, but I've got a flashlight here. I think we can get down here. The radiator hose is down here. The radiator hose comes from the thermostat housing, turns the corner again and again, and then it goes straight down the side of the radiator, and then it runs all the way along. I know it's hard to see, the lights on it down there. That's the radiator hose, and the radiator hose runs all the way along the bottom and then down and over here to the radiator. And it looks like it might be sagging again. So basically the problem is the connection here where it actually holds itself up likes to sag, and it's not too bad right now, but it sags down. It sagged down far enough that it actually rubbed a hole. We're driving down the highway and spit all of the coolant out. And my son was driving behind us. We were pulling the RV, and we didn't notice, or my daughter was in the car, and he did notice a check engine light, but this doesn't have a coolant gauge. And he never noticed the coolant light coming on. He would have recognized that, but the coolant temp light never came on. When the check engine light came on, he said it was still running okay. We said, okay, let's keep going to the next exit at least. Right before the next exit, that's when the low power light came on. This thing has a low power light. It looks like a check engine light, but it's only like half shaded. Low power light came on, and he noticed it smoking. So we pulled over to the side of the road. I do have a short video of that. I don't know if I can throw it in here or not, but I'll try. He opened the hood. Basically, this little cover had kind of melted off, and the carnage was visible underneath. So we continued our trip out of U-Haul trailer, took this back down to Northern Virginia where we still had our house, and I did the first bit of work on it to try to get it running. So the first thing and the biggest thing was, and I've just got this cover laying loose here. This valve cover had actually, the old valve cover had melted. You could see there were holes here all around. These are just wire stud holes. They had melted, and then massive holes in this had melted, and plastic had actually melted down into the cylinder head. That was a mess in and of itself. So the first order of business was obviously the valve cover and the coolant hose. Also, this breather hose here had an issue, and I temporarily patched it at the time. But once I took the valve cover off, the plastic had hardened inside of the cylinder head, and I spent at least an hour, maybe more, probably 2 hours with picks and a screwdriver and a chisel and a hammer, and really broke all of the plastic out from inside of the cylinder head. That was a chore. Once I cleaned it all out, you know, kind of vacuumed it as well, we kind of went down the list and started finding things that were wrong. So first thing were the coil packs, and I'll show you the first coil pack. This is some parts. We'll talk about all these parts before the end of the video, but you can see this coil pack, this plastic here, and just it had overheated so bad. You can see the discoloration kind of coming up the side, and then the cracking. They were all like this. I think there was at least one worse than that. So ordered new coils, put those in as well, and then we said, hey, it's back together. Let's give it a go. I think also at this time we had to put in the oil cap, the oil filter cap had parts of that had melted as well. So anything plastic on this was suspect from the beginning. So went ahead and I actually got it started, and it started running not well. We had no power brakes, and immediately as soon as it started to build pressure, the thermostat housing, which is down here, the thermostat housing, we saw it sprung a leak. So the original thermostat housing sprung a leak, so I had to go ahead and buy a new thermostat housing, and with it, the wiring is slightly different. So I couldn't find a one-for-one replacement. There is a wiring harness here that plugs into the original harness and then plugs into the two switches that are on and sensors that are on this thermostat housing. So we went with thermostat housing, and then after the thermostat housing, obviously tracking down the issue with the power brakes, and this is the vacuum pump. So this pump creates vacuum. It's kind of a vane style. It's got a small cylinder. It's not cylindrical, but almost like a long cube, like a long rectangular shaped vane inside. And that vane had gotten so hard it cracked from the heat. It heated up and it broke. If I could just find the vane, I would have been able to just switch it out and put it back together. It would have been fine, but can't find it. So I had to replace the entire pump. Again, that wasn't extremely expensive. Got all that going, got it back together again, and then realized we still had other cooling issues with this car. So immediately checked what the other issues were, and then one of the big problems is this thermostat housing has a pipe that goes around back of the engine and turns across the back of the engine, and then there's another actually really flimsy, brittle plastic pipe. It's really difficult to get to that goes into the back of the water pump. And I found that the end of it had broken and basically melted away into the water pump. And when I took the water pump off, which was another bear to get to, the water pump was actually caked with fine plastic that had basically just kind of ground up and plugged the water pump. So water pump and the crossover pipe, I went ahead and replaced those, got it running again, and then really just noticed that there was exhaust coming out of, it was pressurizing the coolant system. So at that point I knew I either had a cracked head, which I was extremely afraid was the case, or a blown cylinder head gasket. So I just decided that I was going to tear into it. Didn't give it another thought. Just went ahead and started tearing this thing apart. Some of the things that we did replace once I got into it. These are here are Vano solenoids. So I replaced those, and I'll show you why in a second. And then some of these sensors, there's this sensor here, and these two cam sensors. Just because they're plastic, I also replaced the fuel injectors. I think that everything that I replaced, most of those are probably still good. As you can see over here, here's the cam sensors, and the cam sensors, hard to see, but there is a crack here on each of these. It looks like it might be a line. Part of it has cracked, so I don't know if it's casting, but part of it looks like it's definitely cracked from the heat. But those seem to still be okay, but we did go ahead and replace those. And then on these Vano solenoids, there's this little groove here. This is a screen, and these screens were just plugged up and hard to clean out. So cleaned them the best I can, but they were all of this was actually really cheap on Amazon, so I just went ahead and replaced it. So we got the Vano solenoids, fuel injectors, cam sensors. Once I was inside, I did replace, and I took only photos of this. I'll try to put the photos in if I can. I did replace one lifter because only one lifter seemed to be bad. It was just when I pulled it apart, tried to pull it out, the lifter itself did not. It split in half. So I ordered a lifter. Looking back, I think if I could do it again, they were really inexpensive. I would have just replaced all of the lifters. Exhaust and intake. I think that would have probably been the best decision for this thing. But yeah, I only replaced one. It seems okay. Don't have any problems with it now. And then obviously the head gasket set front main seal. I don't think there's a cam seal on there. Obviously the valve cover gasket set, the intake gasket set, all that came with the exhaust gasket. That all came with the head gasket set. So I replaced all that. While I was at it, I said, you know what? I'm going to go deeper. So I pulled the oil pan, dropped the oil pan, pulled, there's a little carriage there, pulled out the oil pump, which actually was, the bottom screen was full of plastic, so I'm glad I did that. And then I pulled the pistons out, and I replaced the piston rings, and I replaced the connecting rod bearings. So basically gave this thing has a full rebuild, except the rear main seal, because I didn't disconnect it and pull the engine completely out, and the crank bearings. So I didn't do the crank bearings either. Also replaced the timing chain set. That was basically everything I did with this. What I did do to check this cylinder head and make sure it wasn't cracked was I bought the MagnaFlux set. I cleaned it really good, bought the MagnaFlux set, sprayed it down with the cleaning MagnaFlux, sprayed it with the red, let it sit for a while. I didn't see any cracks. Did it again, I didn't see any cracks. I checked this cylinder head over I spent hours looking for cracks in the cylinder head. And then I said, what the hell, let's put it back together. So I put it back together, and it's been actually running great ever since, aside from the electrical gremlin that I'll get into at a later point, not now. But everything else I was able to track down, put back together, and we're getting sometimes up to 40 miles per gallon on the highway, and this thing has been running pretty good. So yeah, that is what I went through in the case of this. I sort of wish I would have recorded it, but there's another guy who I watched his video basically do this entire thing, and it was a trip. I mean, I spent months kind of going piece by piece by piece until we actually could fix this thing. But taking apart the head gasket and breaking the engine down, you got to take part of this engine cradle, or the whole cradle, front cradle of this clip of the car off. Obviously lift the engine up. I think I didn't have to discharge any refrigerant, so all that was able to stay complete and put together. I think there was part of the cradle or something that he had taken apart that I did not have to take apart, but everything else, it was stripped down. One of the things that I did do that I didn't mention a second ago was when I had the cylinder head off, inside of the block and the water cooling jackets, plastic had gone into those into the valleys around the around the cylinder head, or the cylinder walls on the outside, and the cooling jackets, and had hardened. And that again was a lot of chipping and breaking. I bought basically a Dremel and with a really long skinny bit to actually get in there and break up a lot of that plastic. And some of it was like a fine hard plastic film along the walls of the water jackets, but I got that out the best I could. And like I said, it seems like the coolant system's been fine. I do fear that there might be a little bit of coolant in the heater core, because the heater core performance is okay, but not great. So I think we may have some pluggage in the heater core, but I'm not worried about that right now. It does just fine, and it cools perfectly fine, and it runs great. So that is what we did. And here I'll lay out the tools here in a second, and I'll show you all the tools that I had to buy, and then I'll go over what this cost. All right, here are the specialty tools that I needed for this job. So I'm covering the ones that I bought, not only ones that I specifically needed, but others that I just didn't have, that I went ahead and purchased because I needed them for this job. But some people may already have these, and I've used them for other things already, so it doesn't necessarily mean that I had to have these, or these are only for this job specific. A couple of these are. So I bought, I'll start with the ones that aren't specific to the job. This is the super cheap Dremel tool that I use to get down into the cooling water jets to get the plastic out. This is just a spring compressor tool. There's tons of different types of spring compressor tools. This is the one I got. Worked okay. A little bit difficult once you kind of got the hang of it on the bench. Also the spring retainers, or the valve retainers, the little clips that go around to hold the spring down, are so tiny. It was a whole ordeal. It was great. And then I do have another compression gauge set, but it's really simple with only 2 cables that didn't fit this engine. So I think it's a Snap-on set, just didn't fit this one. So I just went and bought another cheap one from Amazon. And these right here are actually pretty cheap. This one I think was really cheap. But a nice set, and I've used that since. Obviously haven't used that, but I could. And then just a bore scope. I used this early on to look down in the cylinders, see if any had broken. But that was just a cheap bore scope I used, and I've used that since also. And then just talking, one other thing is just the piston ring compressor. So I did do piston rings on that one. Now into the specialty tools, this is not necessarily specialty, but you can buy one. So this is a 14 millimeter 12-point socket. The spark plugs are 12-point spark plugs. So you need a 12-point 14 millimeter socket or the special spark plug socket for these, and it's deep well. So it's pretty deep. You got to get down in there into those, into the sumps where those are in. But then this tool is to compress the special springs and on the valve body. So there are some big springs that kind of hold down some spring retainers. This is a BMW style. It wasn't too bad. Once you get the hang of it, I think going back together was a little harder than coming out, but it really has some specific pieces here that clamp into the special, this clamps together, clamps into that special spring and kind of gets it down on there as it compresses on the top of those spring followers. So this is one. And then the other one that I had a tough time with is the camshaft retention tool. So this is a camshaft retention tool. And these 2 tools were, I think like $100 each. This one may have been a little cheaper, but this one I had issues with. So this little tool here is a retainer. There's a hole at the bottom of the bell housing where this slides in, and this actually locks this locks the engine and transmission, locks the flywheel so it doesn't move, and basically puts all 4 pistons are at center or in the center of their stroke, and this locks them in place so you can lock the engine. Between the oil pan and the flywheel, I couldn't get this in, so I did have to grind this little edge here where my thumb is just a touch. I don't know if you can see it, but I did grind it down and made it slide in a little bit easier. But the problem I had when I opened this kit isn't really any dirtier than when I bought it. Someone had used this and then sent it back. I've got extra bolts here because there was bent bolts and broken bolts that they had used. I think this one is, I don't know if you can see it, but that one's bent and they'd broken one. So I found a couple others to put in here. Obviously they, different heads now, but when I took this out and I went to put it on, I don't know if you can see my welding job here, but this was cracked. So they had cracked this trying to get the camshaft sprockets off. Those camshaft sprockets are actually quite they're pretty strong. I know the foot-pounds are really high, so I had the same issue when I started to get them off. The problem with this tool is not perfectly, but it's got too much tolerance, and the camshafts will turn a little bit. And when it turned, and it broke this tool for the other guy, whoever had used it last. So obviously I welded it, I put it in, and as I noticed the camshafts were turning as I was trying to get them off as well. So I think it was 37 millimeters. So there is actually a hex part on the camshaft. So I put the 37 millimeter on there just to help me get it spinning. But this will hold it in place good enough for them not to pop out of place when you're working on the rest of the engine. Once you get it aligned and you get this tool, this alignment tool in there, the locking tool, then these 2 slide right down on top of the camshaft. I think that because of the tolerance, the cam was I think it's the intake, or actually I think the exhaust timing is a little bit retarded. It popped an engine code the first time I put it back together, so I adjusted a little more, and I think it's still retarded a little bit. It needs to be advanced more, and I think that's all because of the I thought I went far enough. I think I needed to go a little further. Maybe I will make a video of that in the future, but adjusting the timing on this thing. But this guy, the tolerance is probably a few millimeters more than it needs to be, so you don't quite get a perfect fit on top of the camshaft. So yeah, that's it. That's pretty much everything on the coupe and its massive overheating problem. Like I said, I was afraid it was going to be a cracked head, and it only ended up being a valve or a cylinder head gasket. So I did that cylinder head gasket, and so far so good. It's running good. My daughter is driving to school every day. You know, the good thing about the Mini Cooper is how tiny it is, how easy it is for her to drive, how easy it is for her to park, back up, things like that. So that's great. But yeah, I hope you liked the video. What I didn't talk about here, that much was cost. I think when we bought this one a few years ago, it was only a $7,000 car. It's still like a $5,000 or $6,000 car at best, if I had it perfectly running here. But I think a shop doing this job probably would have ran $3,000 to $4,000 easy, half the cost of the car for them to do a head gasket job and then basically rebuild this engine like I did. I think I spent $500 or $600 on parts and about $400 on tools. So all in, I was able to walk away under $1,000 on this vehicle. So if you have the skills and the tools to tackle a project like this, you can save quite a bit of money. And if I already had some of these tools, again, it would have been, you know, just a little over $500 or $600 for me to actually complete this job. So, you know, compared to going out and buying a new car for $6,000, $8,000, $10,000, I spent $1,000 and I fixed it. And I have tools that I can use again, or some of them that I can sell if I ever want to. But yeah, that's what I did. If you got any questions, drop them in the comments. If you want me to try to find links, I can dig down in the Amazon and, you know, a year ago and find the links to all the tools and the parts and stuff that I bought and drop them in there if I have a chance or you're interested. Otherwise, yeah, thanks for sticking around this long. And yeah, we'll hope to have a couple more videos on this soon. Halfway through putting a radio in this, had to reorder a plug. So once I get that and put it in, that video will be there. And then again, the electrical gremlins with the footwell control module that I replaced is one problem, and then some other water intrusion that I fixed, and I need to find, I think we've got some corroded wires that are causing some electrical gremlins. So yeah, a little bit coming up soon. But again, thanks for sticking around this long, and we'll see you guys again soon.